Hey man, so we're live. We're going. So I would say welcome.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate this opportunity. I've been looking forward to this since you contacted me, and I'm really excited for everything that we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, no, welcome. And just to point out your background, that's Flashpoint Imminent Media, and that is something that you very recently, just a couple weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago at this point, put out your first piece of content. So can you, I guess, first off, tell me what is Flashpoint Imminent Media, and uh, yeah, what are your hopes for that since it just sort of started rolling?
Flashpoint Eminent Media. To be honest, you inspired me because after our phone call, I had always thought about doing it, and I had it all planned out, and then I just got caught up in other facets of life. And then after our phone call, I was like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm just gonna go after it. So, you know, I did some wizardry, and I have a subject matter knowledge base in a specific field, and so I thought I would utilize that because, um, I really wanted to push this type of information. So, what is Flashpoint Imminent Media? Well, it's like small 30, 40-minute podcasts that I put out on YouTube, and it's essentially going over, for now, what is currently going on geopolitically or militarily throughout the world that's significant and that could impact the average American. It's for Americans particularly because you know that that is my intended audience, but it's really for anybody. And I try to be as non-biased as possible, as nonpartisan as possible when politics come into play. Um, but the topics, well, weekly updates are the main product that I'm pushing out. And this week will also be a weekly update. And I think the next couple weeks will be weekly updates. But I intend on doing deep dives into certain subjects. And I also intend to interview a few people, which I have one lined up already. He's got a pretty decent following on Instagram, but he was a guy that I worked with in 3rd Battalion, 4th Marines, and he volunteered in Ukraine, and he was in the early onset of the war in a foreign special reconnaissance special operations group made up of all foreign volunteers, and they were in the operations that took place in northern Ukraine to retake Chernihiv. So that's some content I'm looking forward on producing, but essentially, yeah, geopolitical and military events and how they impact the average American. So pretty much
Yeah.
it.
And you're definitely on point when you say it's non-biased. I've watched both of the videos you've put out, and I I can't tell you how much I appreciated the nonpartisan, non-biased, like non-corporate media take on this kind of stuff. And it like legitimately, I'm gonna be watching your show every week to get my news because right now, like I any Washington Post, CNN, Fox News, in my opinion, that is old school and kind of trash at this point. Like you can't continue like that and so just all this hate and negativity into the fabric of society without it eventually backfiring, because what's going to happen is when you have competition from people like yourself, from people like I don't know if you listen to like Crystal and Sagar from the Hill Rising,
Hmm.
like those types of people who have this deep, intimate knowledge and experience, right? You have experience because you're a veteran. You did some relevant things to what you're doing now, so you're bringing that expertise out, and you don't have somebody being like, "Hey, this is the content you can talk about. This is content you can't talk about. Oh, you said this thing about Ukraine, but you actually got to say it this way."
Hmm.
So I really looking forward to it, and I know you, so I could just like shoot you a text, like, "Hey, man, you said some crazy shit. I would love to hear more about that," or, um, but this sort of new wave of people producing just legitimate content, and your stuff was very well made. You had all these maps of the events, what happened. You talked about, like, all the relevant shit that's going on in the news right now, like the the Chinese spy balloon and the three other, quote unquote, UFOs that were shot down. And you did it in a very, very precise manner to report these are the facts. These are the prominent people who have something to say about that we should listen to. So yeah, very, very well done, and super looking forward to being able to exchange, stuff with you while you're producing this kind of stuff.
Well, that's high praise come from someone like you, because you're a really smart guy, and I remember our boot camp conversations. They always help the time pass by, and I really appreciate that. And you're right. The mainstream media flow. I think that in the postmodern era, the 24-hour news cycle has really done a lot of damage as far as like producing non-biased content and the news cycle. It's not only what's going on in the news, but let's have an opinion piece, and the opinion piece is extremely biased. It doesn't matter who's producing it. Fox News is, really biased in certain areas, and CNN is really biased in certain areas, and MSNBC is really biased in certain areas. And like independent reporters, like for example, the Twitter gate, that's going on after Elon Musk went in and bought Twitter, and then had independent news reporters come in, like Matt Taibbi, really just dive into the content and then openly published it on Twitter for all to see for full transparency as a non-biased independent journalist. And I really admire that kind of work, and I want to try and push it to this field. And there's some guys out there that do what I'm doing, um, like on social media, that are really good at being non-biased. A guy on Instagram that I follow, Northern Provisions. That guy's awesome. Um, Real news, no bullshit. Also on Instagram, they that I follow on Instagram, they're really good at really getting into the nitty gritty. In fact, they were like, "Hey, should we put people on the ground in East Palestine, Ohio, for the train stuff that's going on and all the chemicals that are getting there? The government's saying one thing, and local residents are saying another. So, do you guys think that we could put full transparency on the ground by putting people?" And the poll was overwhelmingly, yeah, if you can do it, do it. And they're like, bet, we're going to put people in East Palestine, and we're going to be telling you what is going on with no bullshit, no political bias, nothing of the sort. And we're not, I think they're independently funded or crowd funded. So the people fund them, not some corporation or some uh, media agency or so on and so forth. They're they're no bullshit, as is in the name. So that's what I want to do, especially in this field, because for example, the Ukraine war, the Russia-Ukraine war, uh, there's a there's a lot of propaganda on both sides. There's propaganda from the Russian side, obviously. That's their biggest thing. Information operations is something they do really well. It's something that they do better than probably anybody else in the world. And the Ukrainians push out propaganda as they have to, because they have 42 million people that are counting on them to win. And if they start getting bad news at the front, then it's a country that's going to fall quickly as far as morale, because you know propaganda is essential in that kind of thing. And so, as somebody on the outside looking in, it's important to state when something could be propaganda or biased, and try and navigate through the crap, and try and deliver something to a consumer that they can go in, take that information at, not at face value, but probably at what's the realistic probability of this. Like, oh, 10,000 Russians died in one day. Well, realistically, let's look at what we know. This is like a company sized element, so probably no more than 250 guys. and this is what occurred. And so probably not that many, probably less than a tenth of that tribe. That's a rough example, but like trying to do that, it's very difficult, um, and especially when you and I probably have our own political biases, and then trying to leave that outside of the production, and when you're delivering the new content, be politically unbiased, especially in today's day and age where everybody has picked a side, and if you aren't on a side, you're ridiculed as whatever side, the one side that's ridiculing. It's confusing as hell, which is
Yeah.
our political playground. It's a jungle and it's awful, but that's
No,
a big challenge.
well, one thing that I think about is how slippery of a slope it is when like think about the thoughts that a person has about a subject, right? So they're like you said, everybody's going to have these biases. But as soon as you take a situation, like say your example of 10,000 Russians died in one day, and you have a certain leaning of, oh, that's probably true because I heard it from this. But then instead of saying that's probably true, you just say that is true. And in your own head, you like take a little check mark, like that's true. Next, and then you move on to the next subject, and you have that old baggage, and so you're gonna just keep it like it's gonna be a chain of these opinions that you're gonna forget you ever made, but they're ingrained inside your like deep down in your memory banks, and you have no idea. You have subconscious, you're connecting all these things together when you're formulating your picture of the world.
Mhm.
And so like what I hear you is saying is almost like applying the scientific method. Like you're almost like you're like, hey, let's examine this thing objectively from an outside perspective, because it's so easy to just pull in your biases, particularly like for
Yeah.
some of my family. I was born in Crimea. I don't know if you know that, but I was
Mhm.
literally born there. And so I got my dad is there right now, my grandma's there right now. I talk to them. And so it's real hard not to have a, a
Right.
bias on my side of the family, but it's like you got to detach yourself from that, because the consequences of just going along with whatever somebody's feeding down your throat is exponential when it comes to from the individual level to the society level. And you have a duty as a fellow American to uphold that fabric and be like, I understand my personal thing, but we're all from different places, and we got to come together and have a common cohesive uh, structure, because every other society fell. You know what I mean? The Romans fell, the Greeks fell. We're not special here. We're the only special thing about us is the crazy degrees of freedom that we have, but
Mhm.
that's being constricted, left and right. It's just coming in from all sides. And I view personally the thing like um, Elon Musk's Twitter files as basically putting on like a barricade against a conscription, and be like, okay, let's have some freedom of press, freedom of information, and not have all these things of censorship. Because I'm afraid that the newer generations, which is probably the ones that the Russians are targeting, right? Because they sow these things for generations to come. Not they're not going to try to get you and me, right? They're probably aiming for their psyops. Uh, Obviously, they're doing kind of spray and pray everywhere, but what they're particularly good at is getting all of these young people using their natural goodness, natural inclination to try to fix the world, heal the stuff, and turning that into and weaponizing it, right?
Right. I mean, as far as like conducting a psyop or an informations operations campaign, you want to target somebody that's probably going to have a lasting effect. And I can't think of a group that would be the perfect target for that kind of operation would be the younger populace, because the younger populaces they're young. They're going to be around a while, presumably, and they're going to formulate opinions young, and they're going to carry most of those or some of those opinions on and on and on through the years. And if you can create an imprint on how they think about something or how they perceive a scenario, or an opinion or a policy, That's going to last and that's going to carry on. And America has one critical vulnerability, and we consider it our greatest strength, but our adversaries consider it our vulnerability, which is our 4-year election cycle.
Hmm.
And so policy is implemented. Let's, in a perfect world, let's say all policy for an administration is implemented on day one, and that carries on, and the rest of the 4 years of the administration is to maintain the policy and uphold the law. Well, that's only good for 4 years, and if the guy gets reelected, then he's got to go on for another 4 years. So that policy is implemented for the better part of a decade. But what happens for the next 10 years? Well, then usually how Americans vote is we'll vote one party in. Scientifically speaking, like in patterns, we usually vote that person again as an incumbent because they have experience in the office now. They're now the most qualified person for the job because they've already done it for 4 years. So we'll just go and vote this guy in as an incumbent. It hasn't happened the last time, and that's a whole nother set of issues. But just generally speaking, and so policy is always changing in America. And when your policy is constantly fluid, when you have dynamic policy in a country that considers themselves to be the greatest in the world, and that's our strength, and we have the second most nukes and the second largest standing army and the largest defense budget, like that's a critical vulnerability according to our adversaries, because they can start influencing younger people. That propaganda that they've now soaked up, whatever they've retained from that, carries on throughout the years and affects American policy. So they want to play the long game. China plays the long game. Uh, they've had a 100 and 150-year plan of geopolitical, trade, military planning, and they're very patient. And the Russians are patient too, when conducting these kind of things. Like the information operations, like I said, they're the best at it in the world, and they will target a vulnerable population that is easily susceptible to certain information. Like, okay, we could probably bend the truth in on this. And the thing about the Russians, the key, not just the Russians, but the key to an effective IO campaign, information operations, the key to that is to tell the truth in a way. You have the base of it is the truth, but then you can contort the nuances and the details of it into a lie that sounds real and the and is rooted in truth, but in all actuality it is now a lie, and people buy it at face value for what it is, and then they go on and carry forth and affects American policy making. And when, like I said, America is the most powerful nation in the world, policy that we create affects the rest of the free world essentially in some facet or another. Like, for example, a social movement like the woke movement, right? Um, you After it started showing up in America, you now see it start popping up in Canada, and then the UK, and then in some other country, I think Greece, and a little bit in France as well, like in Germany. Like you start seeing it popping up in countries that are similar to us in culture and in how we do things in daily life. Like it started to affect those countries. So things in America start things that happen around the world usually start in America, at least in the Western world. And that's how I perceive it. Now, I could be totally wrong, and some socioeconomics and geopolitical person may come in and show me some facts, and that's where I'm okay with being wrong. But that's how I perceive it with what the current information that I know. And hopefully, I'm not too far off. But I'm okay with admitting that I'm wrong. But how I see it is usually mainstream ideas start in America and they spread out throughout the rest of the free world, and then that's how that carries on. And Russia and China know that, and then they target that.
Yeah, I think, to kind of supplement that, I would agree with you. I mean, I certainly have no expertise in this at all, but even from the standpoint of like economics, right? So like every other country almost uses the dollar as at least a fraction of their reserve currency, right?
Mm.
So there's always this, every single time we've got a depression, they got a depression. If we're doing bad, they're doing bad, right? And that's like by design. We're all sort of tied together globally through this the Federal Reserve currency. So the thing that runs the world is business, right?
Mm.
And when you have, our American business doing well, and you have all these policies and trade agreements and whatnot, everybody else sort of can hop on that train, but we're doing bad. Even to that level. So even if it's not at the social level, perhaps they're at least tied to our hip when it comes to economy, which is obviously the biggest incentive, because money is often substituted, for power in people's minds, right? So, and I want to ask, what makes Russia so good at propaganda? And I guess more than what they do, how did they get to be so good? What's their history of propaganda that makes them stand out?
Well, from what I know in Russian history, I think that the propaganda machine really started to churn after the Bolshevik Revolution that turned the government from Tsarist Russia into Soviet Russia. And I think the communist regime, the Soviet regime that took over, they had this big outline plan. Okay, so for hundreds of years, Russia and its people have been subjugated to tyrannical rule by the czars and the royal families of Europe, and they carry out this decadent lifestyle while everybody else suffers and produces for their decadence, right? So then you have countless thousands, hundreds of thousands die in World War One, and that just fuels the hatred for the Russian monarchy and fuels the revolution. So the communist revolution, now they're established. Lenin has one way of seeing and how it goes. People that follow him may have other ideas. You go on from Lenin, and then you eventually get to Stalin. And so Stalin, he's an ethnic Georgian. He comes into power. He's a very sociopathic individual, and he he takes everything as is, face value. I've created the Molotov-Ribbentrop Act with Germany. They're not going to attack me at all, even though everybody in his regime is essentially telling him uh, they're coming east, like they're expanding east. Like, where are they going to stop? Are they going to stop with us? You know, their whole aim is the entire world. Like, what are you doing? So, um, eventually, Germany is now invaded. He's totally taken off guard because he takes the agreement at face value. He really hasn't noticed what Hitler has done with the other agreements that he's made, which is continuously break them. And so he pays the price of that. So through World War II, Russia is is now in a fight for its existence of against fascism. And so communism of the single class, the proletariat, the dominant class, these are the people we work for, these are the people that work for us. We now have to defend the motherland, so on and so forth. So how do you get, I think the population during World War II was 250, 300 million at the start of it, before they started incorporating their Soviet satellite states. And I'm probably wrong on that figure, but how do you motivate that population that you've already lost a significant portion of your European territory to a military power that it has no sign of stopping, at least at the end of 43, or at the beginning of 43? And how do you churn that? Well, that's when the propaganda machine starts really churning, like, hey, we've got this. We're gonna beat the fascists. we're all gonna die. At least die with a rifle in your hands and prevent these fascist scum from, subjugating us, and like let's go forth and conquer. Let's retake our homeland. Let's free everybody. Let's do this. And I think that's where it really starts. And so they go forth through brutality. They lose 20 million people, and now the Russians have this perception of the West where, you know, every time we've made an agreement with the West, we've lost millions of people. Or every time we interact with the West, we've lost millions of people. So now they're overly suspicious of the West for a good reason since Napoleon. I mean, the West has gone in and just destroyed Russian infrastructure and like it murdered its people in war. So they have a healthy suspicion of us. And now they have now enveloped a huge portion of the European continent, and there are people who are not taken to their rule. So that's when information needs to be changed and propaganda needs to be pushed in order to keep this ungodly amount of people that we've now taken uh, pushing back Germany. We're just going to go ahead and satellite state and annex this territory and bring it into our fold. And but not everybody's on board. So how do we get them on board? And that's when you have elements like the KGB and the Communist Party really diving in and trying to research and develop ways that they can manipulate people from the truth. And I think that's where it really starts. And when you've been doing it for 80 years, like since the end of World War II, when you've been doing it for 80 years, I think you acquire a knack for it. And the KGB notoriously good at it. I mean, the KGB was probably the most. I think they were better than the CIA, in my opinion. Looking back at what we know now, that's available on the internet, of really twisting the truth to their advantage in certain areas, and every action that we take, they were able to twist it to a narrative like, oh my God, the West, look, they're expansive again. You're next. So you should side with us. The communists of Russia, like the Soviets, we're the good guys. Look at the West. They're constantly expanding. And you see it, in the 1980s with Margaret Thatcher protecting British sovereignty in the Falklands against Argentina. That, oh, look, Britain, they're at it again. The ever expansive empire is now at it again overseas. And oh, look at the United States constantly implementing policy in the Pacific. Like, how is that even just? And look at all their military bases throughout the entire world. Everybody's a puppet of the capitalists in America and Britain and France. So they they're really good at that. They've been doing it for 80 years. The FSB and the SVR, which are the two clandestine arms of the Russian government as far as intelligence, the FSB acting more as like an FBI, and the SVR being more their foreign intelligence. They both kind of dabble. Their spheres cross in operations, but they do a really good job of working together and creating essentially a bureau of information between the two of them. And yeah, I mean, God, 80 years of information operations, and they've done a good job at really countering anything that we do, and we're awful at it. Oh my God, the United States is so fucking awful. Because oh look, we're free, we're transparent, we do everything here, everything we do, we have journalists attached to our units. Like this is what we do. We're really good at this, and when we fuck up, it's documented. And then the Russians take it and like, oh look, the United States is fucked up again. Look, they're bad. We're good. Like, why don't you people see this? So they're really good at highlighting what we do bad, and really really good uh, at diminishing what we do good. And we do a lot of good. At least we've done a lot of good, in my opinion, in the past. We have had our fuck ups, and what's that saying going? It takes one fuck up or one oh fuck to fuck up 1,000 attaboys, and
Yeah.
Rich is really good at it.
Yeah. And the the crazy part about, Russia or the ex-Soviet Union, right? Because I mean, they try to tell them apart right now, right?
Mm.
um, is not only they were doing this for 80 years, but primarily it was against their own people, right? The way they kept their existence and power structure was by gaslighting, lying, and arresting everybody and sending them off to prison or to death or to just whatever, for as long as it has existed. And yeah, when you get those kind of reps in, you're gonna be pretty good. Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
those farm boys, right? They're gonna be strong because they're throwing around hay all day. So,
Yeah.
and you could, they come to the, America would be like the city boys. We're like kind of the spoiled, like kind of rich kids, right? So they're gonna be a little more tough when it comes to that kind of propaganda. How do you see? And let me back up a little bit actually. So we have you described the World War II ish propaganda, and now we have the internet, right? So that's vastly different. Before you had some newspapers you could publish some stuff in. You had some independent reporters traveling to all these different countries, writing some stuff down, bringing it home, and hopefully they can spin something out. And it was probably a lot easier to control the spread of information. Uh, but now with the internet, it is easier to do something very particular, and that's to put out so much shit out there. And some of it's real, some of it's not real, but you just throw so much stuff that nobody has the time to sit there and try to be unbiased and whatnot. So with that, I see the internet as a layer above it. So it's not like, hey, it's a lot more. It's just something completely different than it was before, right? So now we've got these fundamental particles of technology, right? So when you get atoms together, they form molecules, and then molecules fall, form other things, and that's how I see all this. So I see information before the internet, now information with the internet. It's a whole different beast. But now you have deep fakes, you have AI, you have machine learning, you have language models, which can spin out anything in the orders of magnitude of like 1,000 times higher quality, better, faster, stronger in every possible way. So I see this as a third sort of layer of, I don't, whatever the fuck that is. I don't really name it, but how do you feel that's gonna, I guess, sort of play out? What do you see Russia and the U.S. kind of doing with this kind of technology? And I guess, is there a way to mitigate any of the fallout that's gonna happen due to this kind of acceleration, if it's not already been happening, uh, intently?
Well, information has always been weaponized. I mean, the saying the pen is mightier than the sword, or the quill is mightier than the sword, like that goes way back. And especially when you got guys like Voltaire and Thomas Paine, guys that are pushing out ideas, and then those respective governments either suppressing or lifting that information. Information spurs movements, it spurs war, it spurs all kinds of things. And so when you have a global intertwined network like we have with the internet, there are certain places on the internet, certain repositories like social media, where I see the internet as highways. And you've got a little destination here, 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 an email box here, here, and here. But places like Twitter and Facebook and Instagram are these massive cities and hubs of information. And you can access an infinite amount of information in these repositories. And so it was I think it was first brought up, probably not first brought up, but the general idea of people like Russia and China using bot farms on like Facebook. They talked about it on his show. And it was some crazy statistic of like the top 20 religious Facebook groups, Christian groups on Facebook were Russian bots or something like that. And there's really that's really hard to like combat, because when you have troll, or they were like troll farms, but when you have
Mm-hmm.
a troll or a bot, and it starts out, and then you have more people buying into it and adding into the whatever it's peddling, whatever information it's peddling out or whatever it stands for, and more people buy into it, and you can't really mitigate the flow because there's algorithms that, hey, you might be interested in this, so check this out, and then more people add on to it, and it's just intertwined and interconnected. More people get up to it, you make it more valid. I feel like people's, like, the algorithms and the macros or processes that we use to attract us to certain information or data, it becomes more validated by those systems when more and more legitimate people follow it, and it's hard to really discern what's bullshit and what's not. You really got to catch it at the source, when it's you got to kill it in the cradles, so to speak. When you first identify activity that is discernible through special programs that Twitter is trying to implement, of what's a bot and what's a troll and what's bullshit, and really stop it before it gets huge. And now you have to go into the problem of whether or not it is bullshit. So, for example, let's use myself, right? I'm trying to be non-biased, non-political, and push out information. If somebody deems me on YouTube to be full of shit, even though I have a whole slide that I cite my sources on, and I show that on my video. I show that. I don't cut that out. I don't care if it's in HTTP and if it looks rough. Like, this is what I have. This is where I've gained this information from to validate that it's true. If somebody on YouTube decides that I'm bullshit, then how do there's, you can protest it, I guess, but we're getting into a whole nother terms of service and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But you're generally speaking, you're getting into the issue of trying to discern, well, what's bullshit. Well, you can't really do that nowadays with how mainstream media is, because everything's biased and some things are bullshit. And so it's getting really, really difficult to combat. And hopefully technology will advance far enough for us in the cyber world to where that will become more possible. I God, I don't know. I don't know if that is mitigatable in any real sense, because, for example, in cyber attacks, right? You can't stop a cyber attack. Like, a Patriot missile system can shoot down a Tomahawk, or the one a Satan missile that Russia shoots, or can't remember their Tomahawk equivalent. Can't remember it, but like, a Patriot missile system can intercept a ballistic missile and shoot it down. You can't do that with a cyber attack. A cyber attack is, you can only mitigate a cyber attack by making it more and more and more difficult for it to be intrusive into your system. And that's true for everybody, really. You can't really stop it. And how we solve that kind of problem is triage it. After this intrusion set has gone in and destroyed this network, or has gone after one specific part of the network to gain access to information about it, or gain access about something else, um, there's really no way to stop that. And what you do is you just triage. You go in there and you just treat it like a crime scene, like a murder scene. Like, the person's already been murdered. Now it's your job to go in there and find out who, what, when, where, why, and how, and then go from there. And then cyber warfare is very reactive. You can be proactive by initiating attack, but then, whoever you attack is going to investigate, be reactive on how they're going to make it harder in the future, and then react by attacking you in a similar facet. So information, I feel like, works in the same way, since they come through the same avenues of approach, using a military term. If they're coming in similar ways, like information, it's hard to screen it. So I really don't see how information in a realistic spectrum, and I'm not by any means an expert on information operations or cyber warfare. But what I do know, I just don't see how it's going to be mitigatable in the near future because our enemies, and I'm sure we are too, our enemies are constantly looking for new ways to manipulate an idea or a movement or twist something that you see on social media or you know, even doing something as simple as TikTok, which has come to light. TikTok is run by a Chinese company in China, and they like, if you've read their terms of service, it's absolutely egregious. All the shit that they do, like we measure your keystrokes, we know your password based on how you touch your screen. Like they're pulling all this information from you, and there's no way you can stop it after you've downloaded the Trojan horse that is TikTok on your phone. So it's the only way to really stop it is to cut yourself off from information. And in a postmodern world like how we live today, where everybody carries a cell phone and everybody, well, maybe not everybody, but a lot of people use like email and text messages and so on and so forth, and communicate through this modem. It's that's not feasible for I want to say the majority of people in the world to completely cut themselves off from online information. So the only way you can really mitigate it is by reading an article, say, okay, do they have a source citation page? If they don't, then go, okay, well, then let's look at some secondary sources to see what they have to say about it. And then formulate your idea um, based on the average reported response, I suppose, which would be,
Yeah, I mean,
you know, it's difficult, and I
who's
don't
got
think
time for that? Fuck that. I'll just read the
exactly
article title, and I'll be like, well, that's true. Let's
100%.
let's just accept that for a fact. It's interesting to me, like the way you're describing it. Like I'm getting like immune system vibes. It's cool how we sort of mimicked our social environment after like what the human body does, right? After what nature does. So like when you're like, yeah, you can't really stop it. Well, that's like an infection. That's like an illness that's going inside your body, and then you triage it. Your immune system comes in. You're like, what the hell is this shit? Like, have we done this before? Have we fought this thing before? If we have, let's get the antibodies. Let's flare them up. Let's get this thing going. And after you defeat it, you're like, okay, let's this debrief, log this down, and make sure that we can fight the same illness, same virus next time. And so, yeah, I mean, if our bodies haven't found the perfect way to stop everything, and it's responsive, and if nature couldn't figure that out after like 4 billion years or whatever, right? So we're kind of fucked. But hey, hopefully, uh, at least some people survive this thing, that because you only need a few. You definitely only need a few people to sort of be the blockade. But it gets increasingly difficult when you're having all these quote sick people, if you like, they're not necessarily classically sick, but it's like a the term mind virus, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I said that to a family member. I was like, yeah, I think you have this mind virus. And then I immediately retracted. I was like, you know what? That is a terrible thing to say. I was like, I'm sorry. I'll say it generally over a population of people, but like I know you personally, and I'm gonna retract that because I don't really feel like that's true. Uh, you're not there yet at the full control of this thing. I'm sure to some extent we sort of all are. How long have you been in this sort of world where you're examining information, looking into geopolitics, like caring about this kind of stuff? Like, what's your not necessarily a background, but like, I guess, yeah, like, what's your history with it?
Mm. Well, first I want to say the body response, like the immune response example, that's a way better one than the crime scene one that I gave up. That's I'm gonna have to use that from you. That's pretty good. Um,
Please, yeah, go ahead.
I mean, shit, it was accurate. I mean, everything we do is it's like intertwined with. either some system that we're familiar with or whatnot. And that's a really good analogy. I never really thought of it in that way. So that's good. That's good we're having this talk because I'm learning shit too. Uh, but like, um, God, how did I get into this? Well, ever since I was a kid, like I
Hmm.
was really like into maps and like not like cartography, but like, yo, I always had like a really big imagination. So I was like, oh, well, I want to create this, fantasy world, and here are the maps I'll draw, and I'll draw like the little maps, and then, I'll, make the countries, and how are they gonna act with? And I've always been doing that since I was like a little kid. I would do that, which gathered some weird looks from my peers, but um but then, I started gaming, right? So I started playing video games. And, the first person shooters like Call of Duty and all that, they were cool to play with friends on like nights where you all got together and like drank soda and ate pizza until
Hmm.
you were just fucking disgusted with yourself.
Oh
But
yeah.
like but
Oh yeah.
the good times. But now everybody's all grown up. We can't do that anymore except over Discord. And like even then it's not really the same where you can't just like look over your buddy and give him the colloquial nut tap as he's trying to like defend something on FIFA. Like, it's not the same. But I guess that those games really didn't do it for me. So then I started playing like then I discovered the world of like strategy games. And then, there was like Supreme Commander 2020 and it came out in like God, like 2002 or something like that. Age of Empires, I started playing these strategy games and resource management, and then diplomacy with another person. And then as time went on, people developed more sophisticated games. Like, then I started playing like Total War, and then I started playing Europa Universalis 4, and then I started playing like uh, Crusader Kings, and where you have to constantly manage diplomacy and like how things, taxation system and and some of those games issued by Paradox. Shout out to Paradox because I really love their games, I guess. But the games that they make, they put a lot of historical value into them. And so if a certain year, real time goes by and the game time goes by and you reach a certain year and a certain month and a certain day, an event will flash up. An event was the persecution of the Templars in like 1340 something, I think. 1380. Can't remember. But it's in 1300s. And then I would look at that and I would be like really interested in it. So then I would read about history and I got really into history. And then I got really interested in how, countries interacted with each other then and now. And then that's what formulated into my decision of when I wanted to join the Marine Corps. Like, well, what do I want to do? And well, this job does intelligence and you gain information on people in order to help the United States and its military. So here's what you do. You do, ASCOPE and PMISI, which are methodologies that we do to measure a country or specific area of responsibility that we're operating in. That's, how can you measure a population's attitude towards forces on the ground? Well, here's the history of the area. Here's the terrain of the area, which comes into play, especially like, say, a country like Greece, where Greece is extremely mountainous. So people back in the day used to communicate via water and boat because land would be too treacherous to traverse. So people would go around on ships. So Greece is a largely maritime nation, and it's in their tradition for thousands of years. So, um, you know, knowing that information, if we ever had to go to war in Greece, is useful because people are creatures of habit. Humans are creatures of habit. Once we've established traditions in a certain area, you usually maintain it to a degree throughout the course of time. And and that can be said for most cultures. I won't say all cultures. China has totally taken a shift in a lot of its lifestyle. They destroyed a lot of ancient sites. Afghanistan destroyed Buddhist temples and so on and so forth under the Taliban. That would be an extreme change of culture. Um, but that's the stuff that really interested me, and I really wanted to know people, and I wanted to interact with people because I wanted to contribute to the idea that our military works smarter, not harder. And if you were in the Marine Corps, which you were, just like me, you know that that's not always true. Yeah, get a working party and go mop the sidewalk as a torrential downpour occurs. It's just like
Yeah, yeah.
this is this is nonsensical. This is ridiculous. So,
Yeah, talk about
um,
traditions that they just upkept, i.e. hazing, right? They're like, this is a good thing. Let's just keep this for the next 200 years.
we've got it. We've got that. But yeah, I'd say that's how I really got into it. It really carried over into real life, um and I was influenced by my father. My father used to be an intelligence analyst at the state level, um, in Kansas City, and he contributed a lot to how I think about a lot of things and how I look at things and what I'm interested in. He contributed to that, so I'd have to give a lot of credit to him and how he brought me up, and my mom too. My mom was my mom was like, I don't know if this is true, but it certainly seems that way from what I've looked at it. She was one of the few female officers in the Kansas City, Missouri Police Department that was able to head up like a major intelligence division, which was like, I think it was like Perpetrator Information Center is what she worked in, which is identity intelligence, which is
Hmm.
everything the military does when you're putting together a targeting package on a high value target, an HVT. You want to know his biometrics, which is, would be his like facial features, his fingerprint, his iris. And then you'd want to look at like, his kinesthetics and his atmospherics, like, what's his gait like when he walks, or, what are his patterns of life? Does he go to the store every day? Go to the supermarket? Like things like that. Where does he go? What are places of interest for this person? So my mom did that for the police department, and uh, she's coming from a semi-intelligence background. My dad's coming from an absolute intelligence background, and then I really wanted to do that in the Marine Corps, and yeah, I would say it started real young. So I guess you
Wow.
could say I was born for my interests.
It sounded like it started when your parents started their career paths, because that integrated. It's like you got your DNA from them, but then you also have your social DNA, and they just like bred this perfect intelligence gathering history buff
Yeah,
kind of baby. That's interesting. You have siblings?
I am an only child, so
Wow. So they were able to just they fucking just
it was all of them.
perfected that. They're like, we're
Mhm.
just, yeah, if you were a recipe, they didn't have any distractions. They're like, we're gonna put some intelligence here, some identity.
Sugar and
Wow,
spice and
yeah,
everything. Intel.
yeah. And then that X factor, right? Well, that's crazy that you were an only kid born in America. Just have this with two parents that's and you come out trying to do information unbiased, like that's, I don't know. It seems pretty crazy to me that you're uh, sort of, I don't know. Good job on them. I think that's fantastic. 'Cause a lot of people, when they're an only kid, right? I mean, just psychologically speaking, they tend to be more narcissistic, more about themselves, more about this and that. And then, uh, yeah, I don't know. I don't really know where I'm going with that. It's just I'm appreciating that you came out pretty well, because knowing you from, and let's just say this out there to the whatever potential audience we got. Uh, you and I met in boot camp, and that
Mhm.
was the extent of our really everything, our relationship. We didn't hang out, we didn't even see each other after that, right? Not
No.
once. There was one time where we almost saw each other in 29 Palms. I was in the schoolhouse, you were doing some shit, but the things didn't work out. uh but, and just for context, like, you don't necessarily get to know people that well. You get to know them at their base level reaction, like how, you know what I mean? It's not like you're just sitting there chatting all the time. You had what, the square away time. That was literally about it. Everything else has to be in the context
Uh,
of like get your shit together. And yeah,
yeah,
you were
yeah,
always
yeah, yeah.
very
Do you
honorable.
remember? Do you remember in Square Away Time where where somebody just ripped ass, and then senior drill instructor was like, "All right, turn on the vacuum," and everybody
Yeah.
had to suck
Oh
it
yeah,
in.
yeah. Turn on the vacuum. Oh,
And
dude,
then
I
yeah,
wouldn't do that. I would pretend every time. I'm like, I'm not fucking sucking in his farts, bro. I was like, that is degrading beyond belief.
I would just like
Uh,
do the mouth motion. I would be like,
yeah. I guess yeah, it is what it is. Yeah, there's too many of those moments, but in that sort of environment is sort of where we had our interactions, and I remember you and I were chosen. Do you remember the drill instructors needed a couple of us to do the test, right? That whatever the fuck, the
yeah,
written and otherwise test that we had to do, so that we can bring back the intel to the platoon.
mm,
And it was you and me, because they're like, oh, okay, hopefully these guys aren't fucking dumb. Like we got to send people out there with I don't know what I don't know how they chose their thing, but man, I would pay money to see them talk about us in their little fucking huts, dude. I would love to understand
to
what
be
their
a fly on the
perspective
wall.
is. Oh,
Mm.
dude. Yeah.
It
That
was
was
they were the and like I'll just go ahead and say this. Uh, everybody who joins the Marine Corps, right, is on the spectrum one way or another. Okay, and so they were just letting us take the test to really measure how deep into the spectrum we went, because they just, oh man, to be, you're right though, to be a fly on the wall and that conversation in the duty hut, oh my god. They're like,
yeah.
what do you think Yanchenko's gonna do? Do you think he's gonna pass this thing? Well, I know Morton's not. Morton's a fucking idiot.
Yeah.
He can't even make
But
his bed on time.
but hey, no, we did though. We did, and we brought back the recon. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
We sort of pulled that off. And just to kind of linger on that boot camp experience a bit longer, man, did we have a fucking good guide, huh?
Oh,
Grass Kemper, dude. I
hmm,
couldn't like what. First of all, what that guy is a leader, just straight up leader. There's nothing you can do about it. He is a leader. People wanted to follow him. People were afraid of him. People respected him. He was smart, and he genuinely put his entire fucking being. He tried to quit like a couple times, and you were right there. I remember he dropped his fucking guide on, and I remember this very just visceral moment, because he was just he I mean he was the guide is used and abused by the drill instructors more than anybody else, because that's just how it goes. And you
yeah,
you
community
you fucking
punishment.
yeah, you ran out when he dropped his guide on, and you picked it up, and you're like, you're the fucking guide, and you gave it back to him, and I was like, damn, dude. And he got his moral back after that, and then he's like, all right, fucking all right, I
You're
guess I can do this another day.
you're 100% right. That guy was the leader, and um, Bryce, I knew him a little bit. Actually, there's a funny story about me and him, because we were battle buddies going into boot
Ah,
camp. I don't
yeah,
know
yeah.
if you remember that. We both came from the same recruiting station, or the
Kansas
same
City.
MEP. Yeah, the same
Yeah.
MEPs, Kansas City. And so we went. He was in the same school district I was in, but we went to two different high schools because our district was pretty big. And we actually ended up like dating the same chick some at
Wow.
different times. So we knew of each other, and we did not have a healthy liking to one another. And we knew of each other because like we would talk shit to each other back and forth. It's just broad chesting as you do as a
Yeah, yeah.
youthful male. So we go to the hotel the night that we're shipping out. We see each other face to face, and we kind of came to this realization that we're kind of fucked if we can't get along. So we're just gonna shake hands and bygones be bygones. And we were battle buddies, as they label you. So, it I would say that before the Marine Corps, much of what you described in Only Child, or what you typically see, I would say that I was a few of those things. I was definitely
Mm,
self-centered. Um, I wouldn't say I wouldn't say that I am anymore. I would say that I'm selfish in healthy ways, right? It's
mm,
always healthy to be selfish in certain ways.
yeah.
But I was unhealthily selfish in a lot of ways, and I was greedy in a lot of ways, and this is all before the Marine Corps. And I think the Marine Corps definitely fine tunes you, especially in boot camp. They really break you down, rebuild you, and reform you. I think that's how the three phases ended up working out.
Hmm.
And um, yes, so when we went to boot camp, I wasn't the type of person to put myself out there for somebody not only did I not know, but that I did not like, right? But as time went on, I really admired him because he really did put his entire fucking being on the line in such a hostile environment with four drill instructors that were just so fucking unforgiving, which is how it should be, right? That's good fucking training. Mothers of America can go kiss my ass and try and make Marine Corps boot camp as soft as they want. If you've got a drill instructor that is willing to absolutely fucking punish you for doing the right thing, that is life. That is life, and that needs to be recognized that that is good training. You just need to punish them even when they do the correct thing. And that guy did what he needed to do, and he needed help along the way, and I put myself out there to help him because the Marine Corps had shaved me into that person, I would say.
Yeah, and I'm very, very sorry. My son came in here. He snuck in, but I'm sorry. I can't help you. He's got the. Go find Mama, dude. She'll help you out. Okay. Can you close the door? Jesus Christ,
I'll
dude.
be there soon.
He just came in with no pants on, holding a Nintendo Switch, and I can't hear him. And he's just like playing with like my camera and my equipment, and he's like, "Papa, da, da, ba, da, ba, 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 ba." He's 4 years old.
That's
So
awesome. That's
yeah,
funny.
but
God,
no, okay. Sorry that got super derailed. But basically, you're talking about how badass Bryce was. And I'm glad we had somebody like that because, man, having a weak person as your leader, as a guide, it, weak people in power are a billion. That's how you got all those, all those fucking incels. That's how you get people stalking like women. That's how you get murderers. And that you have weak men are so capable for destruction.
oh
And
yeah.
when you put power in front of their in front of them, they always fucking take advantage because I've never had that. But
I will
you
say
know,
this about Bryce. He is he's a very straightforward guy, and he and I disagree to this day. I haven't talked to him in a long time, uh, but we had like a political spat, and like he is on the opposite end of the spectrum as I am, to the point where he is really, 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 really steadfast in his beliefs, which I respect. I respect that. Um, and you wouldn't think of it as somebody like that where he is. He's extremely opposite of where I am. And seeing what I've seen and seeing how he works in adverse environments and seeing how just he might think about giving up, but he won't. And it took Marine Corps boot camp for him to figure that out on his own. Like, you really have the potential to do everything you need to do to keep going. You just have to apply it. If someone like him were to come into power, let's say as a president or as a senator, House of Representative, I would I would follow him, even though I really disagree with him on a lot of stuff because I know that he comes from a good place with a lot of his ideas. He comes from a good place. And as you were saying, when you have strong men with strong moral fiber, the testicular fortitude, as they would say in the Marine Corps, I would follow him because he's coming from a good place to try and make people's lives better. And I respect that. And even though we don't agree on the method of doing it, how he wants to do it is, maybe different from mine, but I would agree with his end meat.
And I'm sorry, now my daughter invaded. This is unprecedented. Jesus. What? No, I haven't watched the car yet. She's 2. She's telling me that I told her earlier I was going to watch the car, and I haven't yet. So she's coming to lecture me. All right, I'm very sorry.
No worries. Yeah. So, as I was saying, even though Bryce and I differ heavily on political viewpoints, as you were saying, he, a guy like that who faces adversity and tries no matter what to do the right thing and to keep going no matter how many times he's getting kicked, he just gets up and keeps going. Even though he and I totally disagree on how to do certain things, our ultimate goal is to make people's lives better, right? So if someone like him were to come to office, a strong hearted man, a good hearted man, comes into office and does something and tries to push a political agenda that maybe I don't agree with, but like I said, he's trying to make people's lives better, I would support that because I know the guy and I know what he's capable of, and I know and I've seen him really tried and tested, and he's come out on top. Like, and I respect the hell out of him. I think he's a good guy, and he comes from a good place. But I think people lose sight of that. Like, there's a lot more to ideas. It's the people that implement those ideas and push those ideas forward. And when you, like you were saying, weak men come and do, and weak men have these ideas, and they aren't strong in the sense of being a leader. They aren't strong in the sense of convincing people. They aren't strong in correctly implementing their ideas through certain policies. And then because they're weak, they have to create shortcuts for themselves. And those shortcuts oftentimes have adverse effects on the people that they're trying to help.
Yeah, and a major, or rather a fatal flaw, is their proclivity to fall for corruption, from either from other people or for their own personal gain. And strong leaders, strong people, they keep tyranny at bay, right? That's
Yeah.
who, you have like the Winston Churchills, like, try being in government with that guy and trying to fucking coerce him, or did he call you out in front of everybody? He'd be like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
You're trying to give me money to do what? It's like, go fuck yourself.
You
Like,
can go fuck yourself.
yeah. I don't have a good I don't have
Oh, I
a good
don't
impression
either.
of him. Yeah.
Clearly.
but yeah, that's what's important. And like, man, people can't forget that right now in the US, we are living in a fucking fairy tale, in a absolute fairy tale, that like there's almost like a need. It's like in the military. Okay, let me just back up. In the military, you cycle every couple of years, right? 2 or 3 years, whatever. You go maybe 4 to another duty station, another command. People are like, hey, you fucking been in this battalion for how long? Get the fuck out of here. Go see something else. That's to get a new perspective. That's to not stagnate. And we've fallen for the worst possible stagnation, which is like decadence, right? We're like regressing morally. And that's not like, it's nobody's fault. It's just the way it is when you got relative peace, prosperity, and don't have to worry about where you're going to eat, don't have to worry about your shelter. Even if you're poor in America, bro, being poor in America is like, you're a fucking king. Where I came from, like Moldova, I lived there for until I was 10 years old. My parents divorced when I was 3. So my dad's Russian, my mom's she's Romanian and Ukrainian, and Moldovan, and so her family was from Moldova. My father's side is from Crimea, and and being, even if you're not an incompetent person, even if you have all your wits, even if you have the capabilities that drive, you're one of those people, like, you're just fucked if you're there. You're kind of just fucked unless you join the mob, unless you join the mafia, shake people down, do something. There was just incredible people, incredible artists, incredible whatever, and they have to make little dolls and go sell them on the fucking market because there's
Yeah.
no avenues for things to do. And so it is a fantastic thing what we have in America. It is that's how it's supposed to be. But then you got to understand that you're a human in a world that's dangerous, and the most dangerous thing is other people, and other people are most powerful when they're in groups, and we that's already there. Everybody's already in a group. It's like you can't go back. You can be like, hey guys, let's just go back to living in villages, and like, it's like, no. We've established powers. We have nukes. We have this. We have that. And when you're isolated away on some beautiful, majestic island, that's not permanent.
Mm.
That is upheld by the people in the military. That is upheld by the fabric of leaders that we have in government, going out and talking to people like Putin and be like, hey man, like, we're armed, we're ready for conflict, for this and that. And they're a representative, and like, literally they represent us. And so they keep this away, but it's like a parent that over shelters their kid is going to inevitably produce a spoiled brat that just doesn't know any better, and they're going to be more susceptible to, I think, to dangerous behavior and activity. And I'm very afraid that people don't think like that when we're talking about these geopolitical conflicts. They just think like, oh, we should just strive for a utopia here. Everybody should be, XYZ, and we should not, not be, capable of absolute total destruction. It's actually, no, you have to be capable of absolute and total destruction, but you have to have that as a reserve. You have to be a strong enough person not to use that, right?
Right.
That's a strength again. A strong person, like I'm thinking of like an MMA fighter. Most of those MMA fighters are probably so confident and competent and know what combat is. They're not gonna just fall for every asshole at a bar who's trying to get. They're like, dude, I'm not. You know what I mean? They have the reservation. But if they're walking down an alley and somebody attacks their woman, they're there to explode, right? They're ready to unleash the monster, and that's how we have to be. As a nation, but a nation is made up of people, and I'm very afraid, sort of where the public consciousness is at this point, or I just perceive that because I consume social media. I have no fucking idea. You tell me, what's your perception?
Well, I agree with you 100% on everything you just said. Um, I think it's not just true with humans though, because like it's a it's more of like an ecological expanding like thing that is in every multicellular organism's brain, which is that ability to assess risk. And for example, you'll see a bachelor lion traveling the savannah of Africa, searching for a pride that he can conduct a hostile takeover from the existing male, and now he has room to propagate and carry on his DNA and kill the cubs of the existing lion that was there. And you have to be the lion in your pride that no one will want to fuck with ever, because one day a lion is going to come along and he's going to want to take your spot, and you have to be prepared for that. And weak men don't really fit into that equation at all. We're human beings. A weak lion, he gets fucking destroyed. I guess you could kind of put it in that position. If a weak lion is in charge of a pride, somebody else is going to roll up and roll his shit But humans are a bit more complicated than that, in the sense that weak men will seek alternative methods that to undermine their opponent, or to undermine something that is adverse to them in their environment. And to be a strong individual, to be a strong man, to be a strong woman, you really have to seek methods to better yourself. And you are only strong if you have a routine, you work out, you maintain physical healthy lifestyle for your body, a mental healthy lifestyle for your brain. You constantly read and update yourself and absorb new information and do it from different sources, so you can constantly work your brain out to see, well, what makes sense here, and is this the truth? And, well, this doesn't seem like the truth, so I'm going to have the ability to check this out and do things the hard way, which are a lot of times the correct way, and not be a weak individual and seek the 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 easier way out of things. And I agree with you 100% on everything you're saying. And it's just, I think there's almost a disgusting amount of acceptance for people to be weak, you know, and that transfers to the nation, right? So our nation is heading, in my opinion, in a direction where our military is now being a mere reflection of this, of our policies. And we're degrading our training. We're degrading our we're degrading our standards for physical fitness. We're degrading um, psychological, like, readiness, or standards for people to give it, for people to be accepted in the military. So I think when things like that at the civilian level are then transferred to the government level, and then by proxy the military is affected, you're going to have a serious fucking issue on your hands. And that's where that old proverb comes in, where, strong men, like, hard times make strong men, strong make good times make weak men make hard times. Like, we're in the cycle where uh weak men make hard times. And I think that should be a bipartisan opinion, that everybody should agree that things are unraveling at the global level that should really, really, really scare people at the potential of where they could go. I think the kind of tie this in with the war in Ukraine. I think this war is a perfect example of how weak leadership enabled a conflict that could easily spill into something way worse than what it is now. If we had strong leadership that could negotiate and guide negotiations in a certain way and come up with valid talking points in a diplomatic method towards Russia before any of this happened, I think it would have been very easy to avoid this current conflict that's going on, where tens of thousands of people are dying by the week. It's god awful. War in Europe, as people always say, the world really goes in a southerly direction when war in Europe occurs. Generally speaking, how it goes. And I think there could have been a lot of ways that you could have appeased Russia and Ukraine at the same time, that, with some common sense negotiating, really would have fixed the problem. And I think, let me just throw this one at you. All right, my geopolitical idea how this could have been solved. And this is not my original idea. A guy I used to work with, who is coincidentally of Ukrainian descent, a guy I used to work with at the last job I had, um, really smart guy. He was an Army EOD tech. So had to be smart. Cool cucumber under pressure, right? This guy's seen a lot of shit. And he has a lot of time to himself to think about certain things like this. Like, the idea is that before this conflict even kicked off, you go up to Ukraine and says, hey, the United States can be a mediating body. Russia, you can invite somebody as well, except China. Don't let them be involved. We want you. And we'll invite Ukraine and we'll mediate this talk. And here's what we can do. Russia, you're going to give all the territory that you have so-called annexed from Ukraine back to them because they feel that it is theirs and they've held it for a long time. And Russia's going to be like, well, fuck you. There's the majority ethnic Russians in the area. And if you look at Russian history, Russians, their policy making revolves around the ethnic Russian individual. They don't give a shit about anybody else in their border except ethnic Russians. And that's a fact. And you can look at that throughout history. And the way that their military is set up, they don't let Azerbaijanis, they don't let Armenians, they don't let Uzbeks, Tajiks, they don't let Kazakhs at the officer level. They just don't. Those people are at the conscript enlisted level that don't gain any real power or tactical decision making. They'll make sergeant maybe. Platoon leaders and platoon sergeants, those are ethnic Russians. All the calls are made by Russians. They don't let anybody else who's not ethnically Russian to do really any sort of like call, tactically speaking, strategically, operationally, policy making wise. They don't allow it. And it's been that way for a long time. And so you got to talk to Russia and appease them in a way that they're going to give up territory that's largely ethnic Russian, that they want to have access to a warm water port. So that's not Kaliningrad, right? Where they're just squished by NATO countries everywhere, right? What you have to do is you have to appease to them in the sense that you're going to give Ukraine back its territory and we're going to invite you into NATO. You're going to be a part of NATO. And this was an idea that was extremely plausible in the early 2000s. We had very warm relations with Russia under the Bush administration. Not maybe so much to what anything Bush did, but because of Putin and where he was at in life and what he had for Russia, he was at an area where Russia could have been like Turkey in NATO. You know, that little brother that's a part of your alliance that really does some shit you don't like, but you let it slide because you know when push comes to shove, they'll have your back due to a military alliance, right? And what you tell Russia is you'll be a part of NATO, so you no longer have to fear NATO. You'll be a part of it. No one will fuck with you. And if anybody outside of NATO does, you have the rest of us to come help you out. And anybody inside NATO fucks with you, they'll be kicked out and then be subject to anybody within NATO. So now they gain that security, that peace of mind. Now they gain that the world gains an unprecedented amount of global security, of having the majority of nuclear warheads under one military treaty. Now, that's not enough for Russia. You have to give Russia something else. You have to turn on the faucet of cash. How do you do that? Take half of what we do in China industrially and give it to Russia. Russia needs an economic boost. Their people are living it hard, especially now with everything that we've done as far as sanctions wise. Russia's really hurting. The ruble is hurting. Russians make good shit. Russian engineering is some of the best in the world. And unfortunately, they used a lot of that for military equipment and means of destruction in the past. But given the right circumstances, the Russian people would gladly go to work in a plastics factory and produce something really good for everybody else. Because the Russians can make good shit if they want to. And Russian engineering is some of the best, like I said. And if you just give half of what we do in China and give it to Russia, open up stuff in Russia, which would be cheap, by the way, and it would be cheaper now than it would be to open up something in China. But not only do you give Russia a cash flow that gives them an economic boom, that provides them security stability within the region and throughout the entire world, essentially. But now you've pitted them against the biggest threat in the world, which is China. People's Republic of China is by far the greatest geopolitical threat this world has ever seen. or has the possibility to be one. You could make a case for Nazi Germany and the Empire of Japan, but as of today, it most certainly is. And I think when you pit Russia against China, they're not bedfellows anymore. You really could have pitted them against each other to where now Russia is on your side. You gain a northern flank on China. You have an eastern flank on China in the Pacific and all of those islands, and you have a southern flank on China with all of those Indo-Pacific states that really don't have warm relations with China. And then you have a moderate western flank on them with India. And that could have solved a lot of our issues. And you know what would have taken that was strong leadership, which we were sorely in need of at the time that this thing kicked off.
Oh boy. That seems like just an alternate universe that could have happened, right? That,
Global
I don't,
peace, a Pax Romana, almost.
yeah. Like, when I hear you talk about that, what I think about is the nudging from the different nations, different, I don't even know if this is at the nation level or maybe a layer in between or above, but just interest, parties with interest, whatever the fuck that means, and again, like, I get all my information piecemeal together, so, like, it's hard for me to even say where I coming up with these thoughts, but, like, I don't feel like we wanted, like, we as in maybe perhaps the US, perhaps US plus allies, whatever. It didn't seem like we wanted any sort of peace deal. We, for some reason, and I mean, you tell me this is anomaly, gave so many weapons, so much, equipment, so much money, like that, with no congressional oversight on what the money's being spent on. And it's just really fucking weird. We were talking about weak men. And the very insidious thing that I kind of see propagating throughout our society is those weak, we say weak men, but it could be just weak people, right? It's just a phrase, people, relax. But these weak men are being propelled into those positions of power because they're easily controlled and influenced, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of the decision making folks, at least in the US that I see, it's so, like, clear as day when I hear them talk, when I understand their viewpoints of what they represent. I'm like, this person is spitting out complete horseshit that's aligned with everybody else that's part of their group, that's part of their party. And it's like literally like watching, professional wrestling, and they're just acting out their thing. And we know that The Rock's gonna come out and he's gonna beat Hulk Hogan this time because Hulk Hogan is past his prime. And we're all just fucking watching this and eating popcorn, and it's very strange. It's just like, did everybody lose their fucking minds here? Like, this is fucking America, man. This is like, we're supposed to be like the complete opposite of that. But what we have done, I feel, is created a house of cards and called, we're saying, yeah, no, we're totally against tyranny. We're totally against government control and everything. This is for the people, by the people. And we're painting this beautiful image. And then, like the Wizard of Oz, on the other side of the curtain is just these fucking, I don't know what it is. I have no idea. But it seems like there is somebody behind that curtain, or something behind that curtain that's kind of pulling the strings. And like, what the hell do you do with that? Because, like, what you said, probably makes perfectly logical sense, but we're not in a landscape where logic, reason, and that shit's not enough anymore. Like, somebody's flipped a switch, and now we gotta combat this in a sort of different way. So I guess if you were in any sort of leadership position, what the hell do you do about within America? Like, what are your first, second, third, fourth, whatever order of things that you'd be like, all right, executive order number 1, 2, 3, or whatever? Like, have you thought about that? Do you have anything that comes to mind?
Mm. Man, that's. Ooh. Well, ideally, I would like to not pass anything via an executive order
Mm.
because I feel like executive orders should only be used for emergencies. I think the process of the bill going through its checks and balances to be passed properly and written into law in a bicameral legislature with an executive branch to enforce it and a judicial branch to judge the value of veracity against the Constitution, right? That's what I would want to do first and foremost. And this whole thing started, I don't know, in the 2000s, right? Where we just write off with the executive orders. I think that's a disgustingly gross exercise of power from the executive branch. And what I would really want to do is it would be a change for sure, but it would be a difficult hill to climb, but it's a hill I'm willing to die on. Is pass two bills. One, and unfortunately, I am in agreement with Bernie Sanders on this. Okay, and I'm not a big Bernie Sanders guy. I think I think he's full of hoo-ha and hot air, but I will say he did bring up a few good points about how our government should function. And like some of those things were um, term limits for congressmen and also abolishing lobbying of any sort by any major corporation. I don't care who it is. Lobbying's gone, term limits are implemented, and the single issued bill. So bills are no longer stacked with extra bullshit that you can use to like that you can use as a scapegoat, right? For the other side not willing to pass it to create votes for yourself next cycle, which I'll go into that a little bit. I'm sure you're familiar with it, but like in Congress they'll stack bills. Like you have the main issue, right? Let's say funding for the border, right? Which is sorely needed. Funding for the border is the main issue. But here we're going to have a little tidbit here about how the Republicans are also going to make abortion illegal everywhere, you know, and that's not a popular decision by any means. Um, to make it completely outlawed for anything, even medical purposes or emergencies, right? You do that, they put that in there. By the way, border security should be a bipartisan issue. I'll just say that. And in a perfect world, we'll say it is. And then that second line there, they'll stack it with something that's totally not related at all, and it's meant to, provide the Republican Party that incentive because now that's a platform that they've passed. And the Democrats shoot it down because it has that little tidbit in there that goes against their platform. We don't want that. That's not what we campaign on. It's doing the opposite. So they shoot down the bill. They don't get the votes for the bill, and now the Republicans can point and say, hey, you didn't fund border security. Look what you did. Vote for us next election cycle, and we'll pass it. That should be illegal. There should be one issue within a bill border security, pass it off. Everybody votes on it, say yes. They all say yes. It's passed. We now have border security. There's no bullshit in it. There's no bullshit. No, you know, women's aid to Pakistan, whatever that bill was. I don't know if you remember that. They passed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember what bill it was in. I think it was in, God, what was it? It was in a healthcare bill or something like that. It was like women's research in Pakistan. And really, all that money is going towards the Pakistani government to create new ballistic missiles. Like, they're not going to, there are no women's rights in Pakistan.
The thing I remember, it was like $60 million for salmon or something like that in that last like Ukraine bill or something like that. I was like,
Yeah,
what is this?
yeah. Like, what the hell is this? Yeah. So those would be the three things I would want to pass: term limits for congressmen, uh, one issued bills, and no lobbying. And I think those three things right there, you could cut out a lot of horse shit, and you would drain a lot of the swamp. as some
Wow.
people would say. In my opinion. Now, there's probably a number of nuances and subsurface issues that are that are known to specific people or groups that might have more knowledge of DC and Congress and the executive branch and so on and so forth. But and from how I perceive the issue, those three things right there would probably be pretty big in getting rid of them.
I actually got a buddy who's going to be on my podcast. His name is Alvaro tomorrow, actually, and he's going through law school right now. And he's just super passionate about like law, and he's particularly doing business law. But as part of a law school, you have to learn like history, like how did the U.S. get its laws, and so I'll pass that by him. I'll see. That'll be the first sort of filter. I mean,
He's full of
he's
shit.
just,
He's full of
yeah. Right. Yeah. Or or better yet, maybe I'll clip what you just said and send it to him before we even have that talk. Um,
I'd be interested to hear him what he has to say. That would be exciting. And you know, I appreciate that you're willing to do that because nobody gets anywhere if you live in an echo chamber. The only way you really make change is if you debate and talk about it and find a common ground where everybody can benefit. And I think that's important. So I do appreciate you for making that offer of cutting the clip, sending it to him, and then create a talking point because I think that's the next best thing. If let's go ahead and assume he's going to disagree with me. It's the next best thing than having us sit down and talk to each other about
right. Yeah. And perhaps that might happen too.
it. Mhm.
The beautiful thing about this whole whatever journey I'm on to creating this content. First of all, I have no idea what I'm doing. Second of all, I just started doing it because much like you, I was like, dude, I've enjoyed podcasts for so long. I've wanted to be on, like, I'd fantasize, like, oh, dude, I would love to be on this person's podcast talking to this exact group of people. Like, I've listened to them for years, but I'm not getting any invites from anywhere. And I didn't know anyone who was doing it. So I was like, might as well just fucking start it myself. And part of this thing is like, okay, so we're talking about being, a good, honorable person within society. Uh, you can be as strong, as confident, whatever as you want. You're never going to achieve anything alone. You need a network of people they're like-minded, not in politics and whatever bullshit that they're trying to portray, but like-minded in let's get shit done. Let's produce something. Let's make things better. Even if we disagree on how we do it, that's great. Let's be arch nemesis in a good way, right? You can be my arch nemesis, but we're both trying to solve world hunger. I'm just trying to go one way and you're going the other way, and we can still shake hands and whatever. And so I'm really hoping that I have no hopes of me being like popular or whatever. Like I'm at this point. If like 5 people view my stuff on YouTube, I'm like, oh, dude, I have 6 people viewed my shit. This is fantastic. But I hope somebody out there sees something and they have a great perspective or a counter perspective to what I'm saying, and they reach out or they leave a comment. You know what I mean? Like, I would love that interaction. I need that back and forth, and I'm hoping to propel to a certain level to where I'd be able to talk to people that I look up to, that I consider great in their fields of expertise. Because I have so many questions, but it's like they're not gonna ever get answered, and so I might as well just start doing this shit. It's like relatively young. I'm 30 years old. I got a while. Joe Rogan started his thing when he was like 40,
Mm-hmm. And he's
and
like
I'm
what,
not.
60 now or something.
He's in his 50s. But yeah, I'm really hoping, and I'm so glad you're like my brother in arms here in this content creation thing. Like this, I'm beyond ecstatic that first of all you started this thing, what you're doing with it, because now it's going to be my news source ongoing until you stop, or if you ever stop, right? And then I'm hoping to connect. Like, I was already texting you, right? I was like, hey, dude, my buddy, because I heard you talk about all this aircraft shit, but one of my friends, his name's Chase, and that's like he goes so deep. He knows everything about all this shit. So when that hot air balloon happened, when the UFOs happened, I texted him right away. I was like, dude, what do you think? I sent him a screenshot of us missing it the first time. He's like, well, the fucking this missile, blah blah blah. And he's like going into the details. I'm like, yes, and I love that. And so I was like, dude, I'll connect him with with Reed because he's doing his thing. So if he ever needs like, hey, there was like a crazy air fight or something, and I'm gonna get the details, I want you to be able to just text him and be like, yo, Chase, there was a F-16 or whatever the fuck F-22 fighting. What are the what are the logistics of that? How'd that go down? And he'd be like, oh, well, this is how this got to happen. And he just gets so excited about it. And he's also a great speaker. So if you ever want him on your show or something, I've already been talking to him. He's watched your videos. I sent him over to him. He loves your content. And I was like, yeah, I'm not trying to match make you guys, but he talks great. He's got a great personality. He's a really good guy. And yeah, I would love to, make the introduction at some point. But if we can just get that, we can just be a whole rounded network of people. Like whatever the fuck I do, maybe I'm just a connection. I have no specialty. I'm a generalist. Maybe I talk to my lawyer buddy, and maybe I talk to you from an intelligence perspective. Talk to my friend Chase from a technical perspective on shit. And then eventually we'll just have this group of fucking people that we can rely on and sort of uphold each other and support each other and hopefully create cool shit together.
Yeah, I 100% agree. That would be dope. Like if at some point in the future, like we have like a round table or something and just go through everything and hit every facet of every issue and hearing everybody's viewpoint from not only their personal bias, but their personal history and their subject matter expertise. Like that's really all you can really ask for as an intellectual. Like to be able to collaborate with other individuals with expertise that are not of your own. So not only do you learn something, but they might learn something and you might come up with something between the two of you. And that's really awesome. That's really awesome about, our country. Like we can do that. We live in a society where we can do that for the time being. But for now, we can. And that's really special. And that gets me excited, dude. That gets me
Fuck
so
yeah.
excited.
Oh yeah, dude. I mean, me too. Like, dude, every time I have a podcast scheduled, I'm like giddy. I'm like, ooh, I can't fucking wait, dude. I was earlier in the garage and I was like cleaning up, doing shit, and I was looking. I was like, oh, dude, I almost got this podcast. I was so happy. I was like, do, like, turn on my equipment, like,
Don't do that giddy thing again. All right. I just literally not rocketed into my floor because I was like, oh my God. Yeah. Hopefully I
well,
didn't get
it's
a
just
fucking booger on my face.
it's you're good.
Oh,
I mean, it's only recorded for the rest of it time.
good. I can't wait.
Yeah. Yeah. And so yeah, man, I hope to continue whatever the fuck this thing is forever, because also, like, I have a very strong agenda here is to just become the best version of myself possible. And if my friends or buddies or whatever they're lacking, I want to be able to be like, what the fuck are you doing? It's like, let's go. It's like, you never know when you're going to be the adult in the room, right? And I say that very, very specifically because, like you said, you kind of made that joke, like, oh, we have a good for now. You're fucking right, dude. We could be the next wave of whatever. Maybe we get invaded and we have to defend our neighborhood. Whatever the fuck it is, man. That's an extreme example, but there maybe one day people are going to look up to you to solve problems. There's not going to be anybody else. And who the fuck do you want to be? Do you want to be the guy who pops an edible and watches Netflix 7 days a week? Or do you want to be the person who has been collaborating and discussing difficult things and being put on the spot and people disagree with you, people tear you down? Good. Fucking let them tear you down. Maybe you're full of shit, or maybe you see how they're full of shit and how you can explain things in a better way to put out your content, your ideas out there. Be like, I understand the way that I said that was actually fucking dumb. No, and that's a great way to fuck me up. Well, here's a better way. Does this make sense? And then, it's like whatever this intangible skill is of, I guess, communicating, cultivating. like we probably need that right now. You know, we probably need that. It's like when we eat too much sugar and your body's like, bro, can you get some meat in there? Can you get some fucking fruit, anything? And you, it just this internal feeling. That's how I feel right now about the state that we're in. We're in an abundance of like, you and I could do this, and I got the equipment. It cost me barely anything at this point forward to just click record on this thing and have this fucking conversation with you. You're sitting there across the country, yeah, doing your thing. We're exchanging ideas. Like, dude, like, you know, I'm not gonna do the giddy thing again, but I literally
Yeah.
like I'm getting goosebumps
I'll
right now.
literally blow a fucking snot rocket on my
Dude, yeah,
again.
do it right in the camera.
Oh god,
But
good luck editing that out.
right. But hey, man, look, we've been going for almost 2 hours. I'm sure we've got things to do. Thank you so much for being on.
Brother, I had a great time. I hopefully look forward to the next time that we can talk, because I had a great time. So I appreciate you having me on and talking about all the issues that we did. It was a blast.